The Alliance for Equality of Blind Canadians is pleased to bring you training on a variety of assistive technologies. Please like and subscribe.
Welcome to our tech training for today, and I'm introducing Jeff Bishop, who will be talking about AI and prompting.
All right, well, good afternoon, everyone. And my name is Jeff Bishop. I'm president of Blind Information Technology Solutions. I also work at the University of Arizona as an IT accessibility consultant. It's what I do for the work that I do during the day. And today, we're going to talk a little bit about prompting with AI, and how bringing value to your prompts brings better results to your AI results. So we'll talk about that. I first want to introduce to all of you, I'm doing a presentation. I know that this is recorded, so it may be somewhat dated, but if you are a BITS member, then you'll be able to get it after the fact. If you're a BITS member, you can join us tomorrow night to hear about Glow. Glow is a project that is really a community-driven project, and you can learn more about it at glow dot, and that's GLOW dot bits-acb.org, and you can read all about it. Basically, what it is it's a tool that allows you to audit and, in some cases, remediate or fix documents that may have accessibility issues in them, with an emphasis on making documents more readable for people with low vision. So check it out. It's free. There is an AI component of that coming, and right now those features are turned off at the moment, but they are definitely coming in the future. So I won't go into all of that here today. Okay. AI becomes a lot more useful if we know how to use it. So our goal today is to teach you practical principles centered around prompting. And when we did this at the American Council of the Blind Convention, and we did it as a 3-day session. 2-day session, really, 2.5 day. And we really had a wonderful time working with about 50 people in the room, and really guided them through this process of understanding what it takes to actually utilize AI reliably. So before we do that, let's just talk about the tools of the trade first. And let's just do that first. So everyone is familiar probably with ChatGPT. Of course, that's probably the one that everyone has flocked to. It's probably the most consumer friendly of all of the artificial intelligence tools that exist today. However, there are plenty of others, and one could argue whether it's as friendly or not. But I mean, to me, I think it's probably it is probably the one that is getting the most attention and is getting, your grandparents even getting involved with their artificial intelligence, right? Because you can do it from the iPhone. You need not even have to set up an account necessarily, right? You just opt in, and then Siri will work with it, all of those fun, cool things. So, but there's other players too. So we have Google with Google Gemini, and they have some free things too. All of these have free and paid models, right? And it seems to be, until recently, we won't get into that here, but until recently, the payment structure for the use of AI has been around $20 a month. That's beginning to change. And unfortunately, it's getting more expensive. But some players are not. It depends on what you're trying to achieve and what your goals are. And we won't get into that here, but there, you know, it's an ever-changing landscape. And if you think that if it doesn't change, you know, that it doesn't change weekly, then you're kidding yourself, right? AI is a very fast-paced environment where we see change all the time, daily, if not hourly. It's pretty crazy. So if you're not connected in and monitoring the places that you feel that you need to monitor, then you know you're gonna miss out on um, you know vital information. So the first tip I have for you is, stay current. And there's a number of ways to do that. The first way to do that is, of course, to monitor the blogs of the providers that you use. So ChatGPT, the company is OpenAI. That's the name of the company. Google, Microsoft, of course, has AI. Uh, uh, Claude, which is really meant um, well, people think of it as more as a geek tool. Claude is. It's really meant for uh, development or software development type tools. Although they do have a $20 a month price tier as well, but it doesn't have all of the features that Claude Pro and others have. So you'll often hear, and I'm just throwing out a lot of terms because you may hear them later in the conversation. You may hear of what we call agentic or agents. Agents are basically artificial intelligence, if directed by you, or sometimes not even directed by you, depending upon what rules and conditions and instructions you put in place. But that, I guess, would be that you're directing it. It will go off and do things on your behalf. So, for example, when I check in, when I check in features into Glow, then there are a bunch of agents that go off and just check to make sure that everything is correct, and that uses artificial intelligence to do that. So it goes off and makes sure that all the rules are defined and all of the settings are correct, and that nothing has been missed, so that when we deploy something, that it works. And you can do this. With AI. Now, generally, agents are used in development type environments where, you want to do things. We're coming out with a tool called Bits Whisperer coming out later this year that is basically sort of like the brother of Glow. And it's going to have even more features where you have agentic capabilities that you can call upon and that you can define yourself, meaning that you can define the rules of what you want them to do. So you could do something like Bits Whisperer is intended to take audio content and convert it into text. But wouldn't it be cool if you had an agent that basically said, hey, when you're done converting these meeting minutes or this board meeting recording, I now need you to create meeting minutes with it, with the content that you've extracted. And it needs to be in a specific format. And you need to follow this type of language and tone and style. So you define it once, and Bits Whisperer will basically then, as long as you tell it to, will automatically, I love that word, automatically, will automatically take that transcript and convert it into, meeting minutes that your secretary or whoever you're working with can spend maybe 10 minutes proofreading and making sure there's nothing missed, or just, slight corrections, because, we need to make sure we're 100% accurate, and that's the job of the human. And so, yeah, that's what agents are for. But before we get into all of that, and I know that that's a lot, but before we get into all that, we need to go back to the basics, of what's possible. Okay. Let me see here. I'm scrolling through going through my notes here. Just one second. Okay. Prompting is not magical. It's purposeful communication. Okay. So what does that mean? Basically, what that means is that you get what you ask for. So, for example, if I were to, and when I say prompt, I mean that's basically asking a question. Okay. Um, that's what a prompt is. Excuse me. I swallowed something wrong. Let me grab a drink. Hold on. Okay. I think we're good now. Um, so a prompt is a question. So if you were to ask a third grader, and I like to sort of think about artificial intelligence from the standpoint of someone teaching someone something, right? Even though, artificial intelligence basically works by examining language. So we call these large language models. So what you type in, it tries to interpret. So let's say you're a teacher and you're standing in front of a third grade class and you say something like, tell me everything you absolutely know about uh, global warming. Okay. Well, first of all, if a third grader knows that, that's great. That's cool. But even if they did, that's kind of open-ended, isn't it? Right? In other words, you're not really giving it enough information to be able to give you what you're truly asking for. So when we talk about prompting, we also have to supply what we call context. Okay. In other words, when you are thinking about the question to be solved or the problem to be solved, you need to make sure that it understands all of the information that may be relevant to the question. Okay. Um, let's see here. Okay. So when we think about um, context, we need to define the who, what, where, when, why, and how, pretty much. Okay. That's not exactly true for absolutely everything. But let's go back to our question to a third grader about global warming. Okay. And you might say to a third grader to be able to help sort of pin this down a little bit more, you might say something like, um, what areas do you believe, why do you think that the planet is getting warmer over time? Okay. Now that is a little easier to understand in that it's sort of pinpointing the fact that you're talking about global warming and not the artifacts of things like storms and freezing temperatures, because that global warming has an impact on that too, right? Um, it so it gets at least gets you in the ballpark. And then you can provide more context, right? You can say something like, here's where I live. I live in Tucson, Arizona, where the average temperature in the summer is about, mm, well, above 110 and can go up to as high as 120. Generally doesn't get that high, but 115 to 118 is not unheard of. And we're tending to see longer periods of time that the temperatures stay at that level, um, thus creating problems for all kinds of things, right? So, in other words, you want to give uh, artificial intelligence enough context, and context is even more important than the prompt. Okay, you can be vague with a prompt as long as you back it up with concrete information that helps supplant its understanding of where your question is going. Okay. So, by the way, I'm going to send out a document to all of you. It has speaker notes and all of that. And I'm sort of ad-libbing this. I'm not reading it word for word. You can go do that in this document. This document is quite lengthy. And so, I'll leave that up to you to to do that. Okay. So we talked a little bit about this. So why do people get frustrated with prompts? It's because of the mismatch between vague requests and vague output. Okay, so what you get, we often talk about in coding. It goes back to when I was in college, garbage in, garbage out. If you give a prompt that isn't too meaningful, then you're not going to get a very high quality result from that. And by the way, when you're speaking to AI, when you're prompting it, just carry on a conversation with it. One of the best things that you can do to learn how to do this well is take advantage of ChatGPT voice. If you've never played with it, then this is a feature where you can open up the ChatGPT app on your iPhone, tap the voice conversation button, and have a conversation just like I'm having with you, right? Where you talk to it, it talks back, you go back and forth and back and forth and back and forth. Basically, it's the same thing. There's no real difference between typing it versus talking to it. And in some cases, because a lot of us like to communicate verbally more than we like to type, that's not always true, but I have friends who love to write rather than talk. But for the most part, we are very conversational beings, right? We love to communicate and speak and iterate what our thoughts are. And you can do that with AI, with ChatGPT. You can even do it with Microsoft and Google and Claude, and all of them have a voice conversation mode. And so if you haven't done that and you're just trying to get your feet wet, that really is probably the best tool. If you're going to leave with one thing here, that's probably going to be your best tool, because at least with ChatGPT, and that's true of others as well, it will sort of lead you in the direction that the AI feels that the conversation should go. Or as you're listening to it speak back to you, you'll think about things that you didn't think of before. Okay? Prompting is not magic. It's a skill, and it's transformational, meaning that once you learn it, you can pretty much use it the same way across different AI tools. Okay, whether that be Microsoft, Google, ChatGPT, pick app, Apple, because Apple has AI capabilities in it too, even on your iPhone. So, just remember that it's a skill, and you refine that skill by using it. Okay. In other words, you're not going to be perfect at prompting on day one. You will learn what works for you. And by the way, there are entire, like multi-hour courses on this subject. So, we're not doing it due diligence, to be honest with you. Okay. So I'm going to give you a simple formula that you should follow as it relates to a prompt. Okay. So we start with a task or a question. What is the problem to be solved? Or what do I need to know? That is the task. Then you need to add context. Okay. In other words, what is relevant about the question? What information can you provide? So, for example, if you know that there is a link or a resource that you can point it to, so it doesn't have to go try to figure out what that resource is, then you're better off giving it to it, right? If you know it. And if you don't know it, sometimes a quick Google search will help it. In other words, the more information you give it, the better off that your result will be. Okay, so context. Again, probably even more important than the question or the task. Okay. Your audience. Who is the answer intended to be for? Okay. Constraints. We'll talk about audience in a minute, because it correlates to something else that we'll talk to about in just a minute. Constraints and format. So this is important. If you want your result in a Word document, or you want it in plain text, or you want it in Markdown, which you may or may not know what Markdown is, but it's a lightweight kind of way to document things, then you ought to ask that. You need to ask for it because it won't know. And oftentimes it doesn't hurt to state that you want the result to be accessible, because sometimes AI will go out and do things like, well, they're asking me about global warming, so I will go out and I will generate a graph and I'll show the trends of temperatures over a 25-year period or something, right? Well, that's not useful because if you're blind, even if you're low vision, accessing a chart or a graph can be a problem if it's not laid out accessibly, right? We would rather have data, right? We'd rather have a table of information or a narrative. So when you're asking for output, make sure that you are clear and concise about exactly the output that you want. Define the constraints. Limit the discussion as much as possible so that the question can be answered and it's limited to some constraints, okay? And then the final one is role. And role and audience go hand in hand. So that's why I wanted to wait until the end here to talk about both of these together. So what do we mean by our audience? Well, you need to make sure that if you are asking AI a question and your intended audience is not you, for example, let's say you're preparing material for a presentation, and you know that your audience in this case is a third grade class. Well, then you want to make sure that you're getting material that can be understood and comprehended by someone who is, I don't know, 8 years old, right? I think that's kindergarten, 6, 7, yeah, 8 to 9, yeah, 8. I think it's 8 for third grade. So that's important. You're not going to write a doctoral statement and hand it to a third grader, right? You're not going to talk about global warming from a scientific perspective with lots of lingo that frankly you may not even understand, right? You don't want that. You want to make sure that you're meeting people where they are, and you'll hear me talk about that all the time. There are people who are BITS members and they know, gosh, she's going to do the meet people where they are thing again. Yes, I am. And you have to meet your audience where they are. So the first thing is to make sure that when you've defined the question, you defined the context, you're defining the audience. In other words, this is intended for a third grade class, or this is intended for a blind or low vision community, or this is intended for whoever, right? A family member, my grandmother, who's not very technology savvy. Okay, my grandma is 100. She's 100 now, and she loves to get on Facebook, but now she can't hear and she's almost blind, and so it's getting harder and harder for her to do that, and even talking on the phone is difficult. So again, that's just an example of, wow, how do we communicate with someone under certain situations, right? So you want to make sure AI gives you the output centered around who is the expectations are that you are trying to meet. Okay. And then we have constraints and format. Of course, that goes along with the audience. So in other words, if it's a blind and low vision audience, you want to make sure the material is prepared for that type of an audience, and constrain the content as much as you possibly can. And finally, one of the most critical parts of all of this is defining the role of the AI. Well, what do I mean by that? I'm going to ask you, what do you guys think? What do you guys think that means when I say defining the role of AI? What does that mean? Anyone have any ideas?
Controlling.
Controlling. Okay. Okay. What else? Anyone else have any idea? And if you're an AI expert, I'll ask you to sort of hold off there, so let others answer first. Okay. Uh, okay. Any other takers?
Your role, the AI's role is to teach someone something,
Right.
maybe.
Okay. 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 So the role is placing the AI, because remember, AI is nothing but a computer, right? So it's going to go off and interpret your language, your words, and try to make sense out of them. But what is one thing that you could do to help it understand the context, the question, the audience, right? And even the format and the constraints, all of these things. What is one thing that you can tell it to do that would be meaningful to understand all of this? And that is to tell it to act in a specific way.
You could
Yeah,
say,
yeah, go ahead.
like you you might tell it, you're an 80-year-old blind person, or you might say I'm a 30-year-old student, or I'm a 70 or whatever.
Right.
Is that
Okay.
what you do? What you mean?
Yeah, right. So let's go back to our example of teaching someone in a third grade class. So you would not say you are a you are a you are the utmost senior climatologist for the federal government, and I want you to generate this report. You wouldn't do that for a third grade audience, would you? You would
No.
not. You would not. But what you would do is you would say something like, I need you to write this in the style of someone who is used to speaking with children at their level, who has a basic understanding of science, that can use metaphors that are clear and understandable to my audience. And I need you to be friendly in the presentation such that it's interactive. Okay. So what did we do here? We directed it by telling it what type of person you should act as, what are some of the principles around the way that it should behave. So for example, if you are working on a Word document, okay, and you upload a Word document to ChatGPT and you tell it, I need you to check this for accessibility issues. Now you could just say that and it probably would do it, but it would be better for you to say, I need you to check this for accessibility issues, and I need you to act in the role of a principal accessibility architect, or at least an accessibility specialist with 10 years of experience of remediating documents. Okay. Because what does that tell AI? Well, that tells AI, okay, I can't just be generic about this. I have to be principled. I have to be thorough. I have to be complete. I have to act as though I am a senior or principal lead that is being asked to solve a problem. And so therefore, I need with that lens, be much more thorough, much more accurate, much more complete. Not that you won't get incomplete information asking it the simple way, but this helps, okay? This helps you guide AI in understanding. So let's go back and talk a little bit about and by the way, all of this is documented, so don't worry about it. So we have a formula here: task plus context plus audience plus constraints plus format plus role equals answer. Okay. So it's a little bit of a formula there. And again, all of this is documented in excruciating detail, and I'll get this document out to all of you after this presentation is complete. Okay. This might go more than 1 o'clock here. Okay. Okay, so one of the things that you want to do, let's go back to the output process here. One of the things that you want to be clear about in when you're asking for answers, especially if they are detailed. If you're simply just asking for a number or something simple, then this isn't really relevant. But you want to make sure that when you are asking for output, that you're asking for it to be as accessible as possible. So what does that mean? Ask for things like headings, lists, tables of information that are properly accessible. Document things in the narrative, okay? Meaning in written form, as though you're having a conversation, right? In paragraph form, okay? Constraints help to guide you in tone, accessibility requirements, reading level, all kinds of different reasons why constraints help here. Okay. Again, we talked about role. Basically what you're doing with role is you're shaping the tool to provide the answer you want based on that role. Okay. So if you're asking a legal question, you want to make sure, hey, you're a corporate attorney and you have 25 years of experience in, well, I shouldn't be doing attorney things. I'm horrible at that. But whatever the case may be, right? So, act in that capacity. Okay. So we've asked the question, we've gotten information back. But how do we know what's accurate? How do we know that? Any ideas how we know? How do we know?
Well, we can double check it.
Well, you should double check it. Yes. So the human should check it. Yeah. Okay.
Sometimes things will jump out that are definitely not correct.
Uh-huh. Okay. Okay, what else? Anybody else got any ideas? Making you
Can
think
you
today.
tell it to check with a specific source?
Yes, you can. Absolutely, you can. So, and you should do that. You should tell it to be clear that every statement should be identified by a source and citation. Okay. Don't believe it because you wrote it. Ask it to verify its results. Okay. And I tell it for every fact you demonstrate, I need a link. Now you're going to say to yourself, oh my gosh, that's a lot of links. So what? You need to know how it derived its answer. Okay. And if it has to be authoritative, and I love to use the word authoritative when I write things, right? It sort of makes it sound like, be very cautious, be stern, make sure you are accurate and thorough, and all of these fun things. Okay. So don't hesitate to say, give me citations for every fact represented in the output. Now, do you need to do this for everything? Absolutely not. But if you're preparing material that is intended to be distributed, or a report, because by the way, and we'll get to this in just a few minutes, then you want to make sure that as much as you possibly can, that you have authoritative sources, that you have everything cited, okay? And you can go and look at the links that it provides and say, actually, that's not a very good citation, so I'm going to ignore that. Or you can come back to AI and say, that was silly. That's not a good citation. Go find a better one, right? Prove your point. In other words, make it prove itself, okay? Identify uncertainty, okay? In other words, again, make it do its homework. It's not enough for it to just spew out things. There have been a number of lawyers across the United States who have used artificial intelligence in their legal briefs, and they went to court and they're standing in front of it, and this is real, people. This has happened, and many lawyers have been fined and held in contempt because of it, because what are they not doing? They are not ensuring that the information they get from AI is accurate. Okay? Shame on them. They should know better than that. That's ridiculous. So you will know better too. Make sure to cite absolutely everything. Okay? Are you done after one prompt? No. Oftentimes, just like if you have a conversation with someone, you're not done by simply listening to the question and responding, are you? It's a it's a it's a game of, uh talking back and forth, right? And communicating and establishing a connection and refining what you're wanting. So the best advice I can give to you, that once you have an answer and it doesn't meet your expectations, or you have thought of something else, or if it's just way off base, then don't start a new conversation. Stay in the same conversation and continue asking it questions or providing it more context or clarity, right? Or use all of the principles of the prompt formula that we talked about earlier. You're going to find that you will learn through iteration how to prompt AI and get results best through practice. And the best way to practice is to refine your skill by asking and reiterating questions or formulating questions that drive to the conclusions that you want. Okay? So do that a lot. Don't be afraid to continue the conversation and ask for clarity. Ask it to define things or dive deeper into a subject, whatever that is, it will do, but it needs to be led by you. Okay. I want to talk about the modes of AI and their capabilities in reference to what you might expect. So with AI today, you have different models. Now, I like ChatGPT because it's a good, well-rounded model, and it works pretty well for most people's situations. They have a feature, and you can enable it and you only get a few of these a month if you're not paying for ChatGPT, and I should be clear here. These guidelines change all the time, so you'll need to check on their website. But there is a mode, and all of the providers have it. So Google has it, Microsoft has it, Claude has it, ChatGPT has it, you name it, they have it. And we call this deep research. So wouldn't it be cool to be able to, and by the way, if you're going to use it, make sure you're using it well. And we'll talk about what that means in just a minute. So if you're going to turn this feature on, you only get a limited number of these, because basically what it does is it goes off and does like massive amounts of research on whatever topic that you want. Okay. And so when I do that, I will spend half an hour, maybe longer, writing up a prompt and following the formula and being very succinct. And by the way, that prompt could be three pages long. Okay. In other words, I want to make sure that if I'm asking it to do deep research, that I provide as much information about what I want, how I want it, what things I should have it consider, all of those things. Oftentimes we'll call, I don't know if people still do this, but back in the day when I was young, when we didn't have the internet, you used to be able to call, and I think you still can do this. You can call a research librarian. Do you guys have research librarians?
Yeah.
Yeah.
We have reference libraries and
Yeah,
researchers.
exactly. Right. So you can call and speak to the reference desk and say, I need information about hippopotamuses. Okay. Well, kind of weird, but okay, fine. But if that's all you say, then what are you going to get back? Well, you're probably just going to get general information, where they live, how long they live. You're going to get very, very boring information. However, if you get a lot more specific about what you're specifically wanting to know about, hippopotami or elephants or whatever, then, then you should. Remember that you're asking that person to take time out of their day to go off and do research for you and return meaningful information. And the same principle applies to AI. By the way, this is extremely expensive to run, meaning that's why they only give you limited use of these types of tools. But it will go off and it will write a research paper based on the question and all of the context and all of the idiosyncrasies of the prompt formula that you give it. It will go off and generate a report. And by the way, these reports can take, I've had reports take 3 days. Okay. Right. If it's a really, really, really complex thing and it needs to go off and do really extensive research, then it might take it a while. Generally, it will think for 15, 30 minutes, at most an hour, and it will return a very, 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 very detailed report, probably 20, 30 page report on a topic, okay, or more, depending upon what you want. Again, you're going to get as much detail as you ask for. So be thorough, be complete. It's a very, 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 very powerful tool, and you want to use it wisely. Again, you only get what I think 10 or 20 of these a month, even if you pay for ChatGPT, and you get even less if you don't. So keep that in mind, right? That this is a limited resource, and if you're going to use it well. Okay. I talk a lot about remediation of accessibility with AI. We won't get into that here today. You can use it to help create presentations. So you can say, hey, I need you to help me to create a PowerPoint deck. It will do that with mixed results depending upon the tool, but you should try it and see. It will even go off and find pictures and, provide animation and do all that kind of fun stuff for you too. Okay. So I want to leave you with one thought here, and that is a word that we often use in the AI space called hallucination. What that basically means is the AI tool, whichever one you're using, telling the truth? Okay. We call that hallucinating. Does it making things up? And by the way, it makes stuff up all the time. Okay. So this is why we have to go back and think about ways to improve itself by ensuring that you're asking for citations and sources, that you're guiding it and directing it. Remember, it's just a computer. It doesn't have a human brain like you and I have. So it has to make assumptions. And sometimes it has its own imagination, whether you like it or not. It will go off and do things that you didn't ask for. So you need to control its behavior. Okay? So use the prompt formula, right? Use a lot of the tips and tricks that are in this document. This document's about, well, I'll tell you how many pages it is when I get to the bottom here. You can, depending upon the tool that you're using, you can do what we call save prompts, or you can go back and look at historical information that you've done, say, in ChatGPT. And if you select the thing that you did, say, 2 weeks ago, it will still be there. And you can continue to ask questions about that very specific thing. Or you can even copy and paste the information that you've learned from a week ago. So better prompting is better communication. It's really as simple as that. You get what you ask for, and you get what you guide it to do. Better verification is better trust. So make sure that you're asking AI to verify its results. Make sure that you, as the human, are verifying its output. Don't ever assume it's right, ever, 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 ever. Check it, check it, check it. because you never know. You'll learn, though, over time when you can start to trust it more based on the things that you're doing. But always be the person that's going to make sure it's accurate. Okay? Let's see. This document is about 10 pages in length. And it's got examples throughout of good prompts versus bad prompts and lots of speaker notes here. It's very thorough and complete. I'll get that to all of you at the end here. But I wanted to leave some time for questions. So we have about 7 minutes or so before we have to wrap up. Does anyone have any questions?
I have a question.
Mhm.
Okay, I do a newsletter every week. And I can write the newsletter, but and get the information because the
Mhm.
sources are there.
Yep.
But the time-consuming thing is because I get some from here, some from there. All the fonts are different. So can I upload a document and say, make all this document, the text of the document, 14-point headings, 16-point, and consistent Arial? Would it then go through and do that?
I love you for asking that question. Um, Truly, I do, because it goes full circle here.
Yeah, it does.
And
Yeah,
you can use Glow to do that very thing. So
right.
you
I
can
suspected that.
go to glow.bits-acb.org,
Hmm.
and you can first audit the document, and it will tell you everything that may be wrong with it. You can tell it to fix a document, and you can define the rules that you want. So you can say, I want you to make sure all the headings are in the right sequential order. I want to make sure that you're following, low vision print guidelines of, 18-point for the body and 20 and for standard headings and 22-point for heading level ones, and, good paragraph spacing and line spacing, and, don't use all caps and all the horrible things that people do, right? Like,
Yeah.
all those things, right?
Yep.
So, so you can upload the document to Glow, and within a few seconds, it will return the document back to you, and you can download it, and it will conform to all of the standards that it can. And for those things that it can't, it will tell you what the problems are and how you can fix them. So that's
Perfect.
Glow.
Yeah. Okay.
So,
Thank you.
by the way, if it messes up your document, it's okay because it saves it under a different name. And if it really messes up your document, I want to hear about it because we need to fix the tool, right?
Okay.
So, if it's not doing something you expect, then you should reach out, and there's a way to, submit feedback in Glow on the website, and you can provide information, and away we go.
So I have a question because I did play with Glow one day and I was amazed. But I'm
It's even better. We
wondering,
just released a new version today.
oh goody.
It's got 30 more rules.
Oh my God.
It's got a bunch of other stuff. Anyway,
So can you specify? We tend to put documents out. I mean, if we're really wanting people with large who need large print, we'll put them out in 18, but
yep.
normally we use 14-point font. That's our usual
So you can
standard.
turn off that feature, so you can tell
Okay,
it to
so
ignore
just
that
turn
if that's it.
large print guidelines off. And I haven't quite
Yeah.
figured out what the
So
APH
well,
strict stuff is.
so all of these rules are very strict. Um, and the reason why this tool even came into existence is because you have people across the country and across the world, honestly, who are generating newsletters, and they're not abiding by these large print guidelines at all. Let alone the blind person who does exactly what she said she does, and that is copy and paste material from one thing to another. And oh my God, the fonts get all, messed up. And who wants to arrow through your document and try to find them all, or hit in, JAWS key F a billion times, or turn on, a feature that tells you all who wants to do that? That's God, right? Like, who wants to go through all that nonsense? So that's really the reason. And because I personally don't, and this happens to me all the time. So, it's about giving people what they need and how they need it as quickly as they possibly can. Now, if you want specific features in Glow and you want to see it enhanced in any way, there's a feedback form. You can put
Okay.
your, make your wishes known, and maybe Aladdin will grant them, as long as they make sense, and that they're meaningful to the community, because it's a community driven project, right? There's,
That's great.
it's a free resource. We're not going to charge for it. We may charge in the future when we build out a lot of the AI features, especially if you want to go crazy and do, 10,000 documents or some crazy thing, or even, lots and lots of documents that would cost us a lot of money to do. Then we're probably going to come up with an approach that allows you to provide your own API key, which that gets a little technical, but basically meaning that you'll pay for the service of using AI rather than us.
Mm-hmm.
So we're looking at that, but that's a little bit further down the road. So
That's great. And I'm leaving. Diana, your host.
Okie dokie.
I have a question for you.
Uh-huh.
I use Siri a lot. Can you use Siri dictation to get into Chat GPT and these other things?
So you can ask if you have what phone do you have?
I have an iOS 2022. The one with the home button.
The one with the home button. Okay. So that may or may not be as supported. I don't have that list in front of me, so I'm sorry. But if you go into settings, and you can look for AI settings, and if they're enabled, then yeah, you can even do things like, ask Siri to ask ChatGPT. So you can say, Siri, ask ChatGPT to, do whatever. And
I do have Meta glasses.
Yep. Meta's great too. Meta's great. Yeah. And it uses AI as well. In fact, it uses AI all the time. That's the way it works.
Okay.
It doesn't use ChatGPT though. It uses its own sort of AI stuff.
Do we need to put in a new password for all these things?
No. No. You can link a ChatGPT account, but you don't have to, depending upon your device and whether or not your device supports AI features or not.
Yeah, I'll have to check on it. Thank you.
Okay, sure. All right. Who's next?
I didn't bother to use raise hands. I figured people can we've got a small enough group that if you have a question, ask it.
Sure.
Yeah.
Well, it sounds pretty quiet. And it's 1 o'clock. I'm going to give my email. If people want to reach out, they can write to president, as in like president, at bits, BITS, that's Bravo India Tango Sierra -acb.org. And if you write to that, I'll get back to you if you have any specific questions. Thank you very much for having me today, and I hope this has been helpful. I will be sending out the document here as soon as I hang up here, and that way it can be distributed to the masses. Okay?
Perfect.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you for checking out our content. To learn more about the Alliance for Equality of Blind Canadians, please visit www.blindcanadians.ca. And if you haven't already, please like and subscribe.